Let me start with Ray. From your point of view and from the IOM perspectives, can you please inform us about the reality of migrants in Africa and the Middle East, their situation, what are the main challenges that they face after COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the hotbeds and the conflict areas? What are the main challenges that they face? Ray, the floor is yours.
Uh, can you actually see me? No?
Hi, now we can see you. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Abdurrahman. As Abdurrahman introduced, my name is Ray Sulo. I am currently working as a project support officer, specifically under the Direct Assistance and Assistant Voluntary Return and Reintegration unit team of the Migrant Protection and Assistance Unit in IOM Egypt. And on behalf of the International Organization for Migration, Egypt, I would like to first welcome all of you. I would also like to thank our colleagues at Maat for Peace Development and Human Rights for hosting this webinar, and of course, the other participating organizations for joining us today. We believe that this webinar is a key moment to provide an overview of the vulnerability of migrants and their subjection to exploitation and abuse, uh, including in hotbed areas as well as throughout different areas, and taking into consideration the challenges that humanity has been facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well to have a look into the challenges in promoting some of the SDGs of the 2030 agenda. And it is a fact that the life of every single person in the world has somehow been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a sudden change in everybody's way of life, which was followed by a steep decline in the world's economy. We have all witnessed the challenges faced by many countries pertaining to the increase on prices as well as in finding basic needs materials. And due to it, the lives of vulnerable groups have been affected as well. And unfortunately, migrants fall into these categories and undeliberately have faced a greater deal of challenges since. The immediate effect of the COVID-19 had its profound social and economic consequences on the migrants in Africa and the Middle East. We could even say throughout the whole world. This was worsened given the migrants' core dependence on providing essential services like health, cleaning, domestic work, agriculture, food production, and ensuring the continuity of supply chains across the Arab region, for example. These are core works that must be done by being present and are unable to be done through a new reality, like the one that we have been facing and currently are working on through a virtual modality. Most of these services, due to this sudden change, were put to a halt, and along with them, the migrants' chance of change and development was also stopped. Some other challenges that the migrants have faced is the restriction on mobility and human interaction, for example. Migrants were left stranded in their host countries, some without jobs, shelter, access to essential services such as healthcare or education, as well as the ability to return to their countries of origin or homes. And furthermore, involuntary immobility was a risk for many migrants located in transit and host countries. As you can imagine, being stuck in another country poses a greater risk for everyone. And the COVID-19 movement restriction and economic crisis that the pandemic brought have deprived migrants from basic materials and cultural benefits, as well as left them stranded along the route. Moreover, we believe that the pandemic has increased stigma and discrimination on these groups. Many groups of people were constantly accused of having had a bad impact on the spread of the pandemic, migrants being part of these categories. And as border crossing became more challenging, people on the move were left more dependent upon smugglers, which left them vulnerable to exploitation and protection abuses. Specific groups of migrants, such as irregular migrants, or we can mention low-income migrants, migrant women, children, and so on, were faced with greater risks because they were unaware or unable to find another alternative. With COVID-19 still present in the world, the impact of vulnerable groups' lives is still a problem that needs to be addressed constantly and I would say even properly. IOM's mandate to ensure that migrants are not left behind is essential to achieving the objectives of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, the GCM, as well as the Global Compact on Refugees, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and its 17 goals, of course. Over from me.
Oh, thank you. Did you finish? Yes.
Yeah, for this point, yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ray,
Thank you.
for your speech. You tackled a lot of important points. You talked to us about subjection to abuse for the migrants and the challenges that they face, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, and the services that they uh, lack in the host countries after the pandemic. And I thank you to mention the people in the move and what they face, especially in the borders and the exploitation that they may face on the borders. Thank you very much, Mr. Ray, for that. Kindly stay with us. If there are any questions, you may answer at the end of the webinar. Okay.
I believe that we're also going to be discussing about the SDGs, specifically the fourth and the fifth, and I would also have some inputs on those aspects as well.
Yes, if you want to continue, the floor is yours. You didn't exceed your time.
Okay. All right. So regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, which we all know that they aim at combating efforts to eliminate poverty and fostering the development of low-income countries. While migration is directly referenced in specific targets within the SDGs, migration is also considered a cross-cutting issue across the 2030 agenda. And there have been many unexpected challenges due to the pandemic, specifically related to the fourth and the fifth SDG that we would like to tackle within this webinar. And they are related to the education and women empowerment. And while addressing the achievement of quality education, which is in linkage to SDG 4, in the Middle East and in Africa, it is especially complex and challenging to provide inclusive education for migrants in this region. Thus, many challenges were faced in the past few years. One of the, or I may say, a constantly present challenge is the high direct and indirect cost of schooling. Even when education in public host community schools is for free, the cost of learning materials, uniforms, and transportation can be challenging to be provided by the migrants. Furthermore, if they are able to afford and attend school or even college, migrants have additional needs to ensure their integration into the formal schooling, and often these are represented in having to learn the host country's language. These challenges were further aggravated with the pandemic, as we all have faced. Schools lockdowns were witnessed across almost all countries at an unexpected scale. Some countries, especially in the Middle East, have successfully adopted to the sudden shift into digital learning, yet it was only limited to a certain social group that could afford its access. Other vulnerable groups, such as those experiencing displacement, poverty, and those located in rural areas, have struggled to adapt to this change in their educational journey. And as we might believe and experience, like it is very hard for a beneficiary or a migrant in a host country all of a sudden needed to adapt to a new shift, go into a digital learning while they don't yet understand the full language and try to comprehend everything in the middle of an app which has around 30 attendees at the same time, and trying to follow up could be proved very hard. And another key challenge that we might touch upon is fighting gender inequality, which is witnessed in many Middle Eastern and African regions. Migrant women are no exception to facing these barriers, if not more prone. Given the high rates of domestic violence against women in the Middle East and Africa, lockdown have thus resulted in a spike in GBV and domestic violence rates for migrant communities as well as the hosting ones. Another problem needing to be highlighted is the ongoing structural and cultural barrier to women's employment. In most Middle Eastern countries, women's main role is expected to be caring for their children at home, while men they hold the social norm of providing for the family's income. In addition, the COVID-19 created more unequal opportunities and gender biases toward migrant women in the region. And we can mention women in the Middle East make up most workers in the healthcare and social services sector. So since the beginning of the pandemic, they have been more exposed and thus at a higher risk of contracting the virus, and of course faced more challenge. And I would also like to mention and emphasize IOM's work in tackling these challenges. While these challenges have been and still are ongoing, so has been IOM's efforts to overcome and works towards their minimization. For instance, despite the still present challenge, IOM has continued to support vulnerable groups through its activities like the protection and assistance activities and the assistance to voluntary return and reintegrate, but as well through its partnerships with other organizations, and we can mention actually Maat for Peace, Development and Human Rights in this case, where IOM is working on raising awareness on the human rights and services of everyone. And lastly, I take the opportunity to reference IOM's protection policy and global compact thematic paper, which provides of sets of recommendations on addressing situations of migrants in countries of crisis. And I believe that all countries should reference and look into this policy and adopt it so that every migrant and host communities as well as other participants can benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray, for all of this information. And I am happy that you raised the efforts that IOM is making in providing assistance to migrants all over the world and Egypt. And how can you tackle the point of before and stage 5 regarding education and women involvement and equality, gender equality. So, thank you very much. Now,
thank you.
Thank you.